All right, it's time to get back into these best case, worst case scenario videos that we're doing a whole series of videos. I've done 4 or 5 teams so far. We're going to do a whole bunch of them over the course of the next several weeks. Up today, my Georgia Bulldogs. Good morning, it's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right, it's me, Uncle Lou, and I'm live for you on LouTube today. So thanks for watching, I really appreciate it also. And 2, if you're enjoying this series of videos, best case, worst case, give this video a thumbs up if you're excited for spring practice, which is starting for most of the SEC teams now. Got spring games coming up here in a little bit. Thumbs up the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year, and sometimes they even make a little bit of sense and are halfway watchable. Up today with the best case, worst case is going to be my Georgia Bulldogs. Before we jump into that, let's just get some quick morning announcements over with here real quick. A lot of you in the comment section and on email and everywhere else, Twitter, everywhere else, have asked me if we're going to do a March Madness tournament bracket challenge thing, sort of like we did with the Bowl Mania over on ESPN during college football season. And yes, we are. I set it up this morning. There'll be a link in the description of this video. It'll be the first link down there. I'll make it easy to find. It'll say tournament challenge or something like that. The password is good morning, but all the information is listed down there. So just click the link, get yourself signed up in that tournament challenge, and we'll see who can win, and we'll give something out to the winner at the end. So good luck to everybody on that. All right, this video comes as a request from Alan V over on the Uncle Lou Patreon page. Alan, I really appreciate you supporting the channel, sir. That goes for everybody on the Patreon page. Everybody on the Patreon page is suggesting these best case, worst case teams that we're doing. So every one of these videos that I've done so far has been a suggestion from someone over on the Patreon page. I'm going to continue to run through all the Patreon suggestions first. Then I will take suggestions from other places, the comment section, email, Twitter, Facebook, whatever. And plus some teams, there's certain teams I just want to do, and if no one suggests those, I'll do those too. But we're going to do a whole bunch of these teams. So don't worry if your team hasn't come up on the list yet. Chances are it is, especially if it's any type of big name program that we typically talk about here on this channel. Yes, I'm a Georgia fan, but you guys know I love college football. And I do my best to cover as many of the teams as I can in a fair and accurate way in these videos. Anyway, these are separate, obviously, from the trash talk videos that we make over here. But anyway, Alan V, this one's for you, sir, and I hope you enjoy it. All right, best case, worst case scenario for my Georgia Bulldogs in the 2019 regular season. You guys know the routine by now if you've seen any of these videos. This isn't going to be like a game-by-game breakdown. I'm still going to do that series of videos in the summer. So in the summer, we're going to do this same thing over again, but I'm going to go through the schedule game by game and pick a winner and a loser for every single game for probably 40 or 50 teams. That'll start at some point in June. The point of this video is to sort of look at the schedule, look at the team, who's coming back, who they lost, and try to get like a window of where that team may fall at the end of the regular season, right? If everything goes right, this team could win 10 games. If everything goes wrong, they could end up 6-6 and struggling to make a bowl game. That's sort of the general purpose and idea of these series of videos. Georgia Bulldogs, now, of course, won the SEC East again in 2018. They haven't lost a game to an Eastern Division opponent since 2016, right? Yeah, undefeated in the East in 2017 and won the SEC. Undefeated in the East in 2018 before losing in the SEC championship game last season to Alabama, right? Went on to lose the Sugar Bowl to Texas in a game that made me mad in more ways than one. We had players that quit before the game started. DeAndre Baker, I'm talking to you, had a couple of other players who should have quit because even though they were physically at the game, we would have been better off as a team if a few of those people didn't even bother to show up. But I'm not rehashing the Sugar Bowl thing. Shout out to Texas. You guys are back after an amazing 4-loss season last year. Yeah, you should go 22-0 this coming season without a problem. But who's Georgia lose off of last year's team? Well, obviously, when you look at who they lost, you have to start at the wide receiver position. They lose almost every wide receiver that had any sort of impact from last season, right? Almost. Terry Godwin, a 4-year starter, gone. Riley Ridley, a 2-year starter, gone. Miko Hardman, 2-year starter in the slot, gone. And Isaac Nauta, a 3-year starter at tight end, gone. 4 of the top 5 receivers gone from last year. The only one of our top 5 receivers that returns is Jeremiah Holloman. Now, I like Jeremiah Holloman. If you remember Javon Wims at UGA from a couple of years ago, he sort of reminds me of a Javon Wims type of player. I do not think Jeremiah Holloman is ever going to be a top-level elite college receiver. I don't think you'll see him on any awards lists or anything like that at the end of the season. Will he make it into the NFL? That sort of remains to be seen, but he's a really good receiver. And Fromm seems to like him on those deep routes in the same way that he did with Wims back in 2017. So Jeremiah Holloman, the only returning receiver. So we got some holes to fill when it comes to the wide receiver position and, of course, the tight end position after losing Nauta early to the NFL. Tight end position, Charlie Werner returns. This guy's been pretty good. Now, I don't think he has the talent of an Isaac Nauta, but he's definitely in the better halves of tight ends in the SEC. The guy can catch, he can block, he knows the playbook in and out. He rarely makes mistakes. Is he going to be an elite superstar? Probably not, but he's a really, really good tight end. And then you got a couple of young guys, Fitzpatrick, Goad. Of course, we lost Luke Ford, transferred to Illinois. Graduate transfer, Eli Wolf, comes in from Tennessee. Another guy that doesn't really have All-American type talent, but what he does have and what Georgia really needs at the tight end position, a ton of SEC experience. So it wouldn't surprise me at all to see Eli Wolf get some playing time this year as a graduate transfer at UGA. In terms of wide receivers, tons of wide receiver talent on the University of Georgia roster. Even though we lose all those guys to the NFL, overall talent-wise, I don't think we're going to be any worse off at wide receiver this year than we were last year. The problem is going to be experience. I mean, until you see these guys do it consistently in college football on a Saturday, watching high school highlight tapes can only get you excited for so long. Eventually, you got to see them do it on a Saturday before you can completely buy in. And that's all I'm waiting to see from some of these guys like Kyrus Jackson, Tommy Bush, Matt Landers, guys who have been around the program for a couple of years but stuck on the depth chart, who were very highly recruited and rated out of high school. And, of course, a couple of young guys coming in with Blaylock and Tongue. George Pickens, probably the second best wide receiver we signed in the 2019 class. I don't like talking about kids' grades and things like that. Very few things are off limits to me here on LouTube, but that's one of them. But it's no secret that George Pickens is struggling to qualify. So that's why I don't spend a lot of time talking about him, because I don't want to come off as dogging a kid who is struggling and doing, honestly, I'm sure he's doing the best he can to get the grades that he needs to get into UGA this year. We'll see. He may end up having to take the JUCO route for this coming season. And then enroll at UJ next year, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Listen, you do what you got to do. We got a player or two on the team now that had to do the same thing. And before you get to typing in the comment section about UJ recruiting stupid players or anything dumb like that you're about to type, keep in mind that whatever team you're a fan of, I guarantee you they have 1 or 2 players on the team who were in the same boat coming out of high school. So anyway, wide receiver, a question mark, even though we're loaded with talent. Haven't seen the majority of them do anything on Saturdays. Timing, chemistry with Jake Fromm, how's that going to work out? I don't know, but don't say anything about Jake Fromm. Don't say anything bad about Jake Fromm. Don't say anything bad about Jake Fromm. They get triggered every time you do. Jake Fromm should have been spending the last few weeks working on things like timing and chemistry with these young receivers. Instead, he's busy posting more fishing videos on Instagram. But anyway, I digress. Spring practice starts today, so he has no choice but to get out there and practice. So we'll see. Third-year starter Jake Fromm. Now let's talk about the quarterback situation. Of course, we lose Justin Fields. There's no point in pretending like that didn't happen or not mentioning it just because people get pissed off, regardless of which side of that debate you fall on. People on both sides get pissed off anytime you talk about Justin Fields. The reality is he's gone. So at this point, he means nothing to me in terms of me being a Georgia fan. He's gone. I really could care less whether he throws for 5,000 yards or 1,000 yards at Ohio State. It makes no difference to me. I do think he's got talent, will end up being a good college quarterback, but it matters not to me in terms of being a UGA fan. What matters to me is what's going to happen if Jake Fromm goes down. That's the issue we're looking at this year. Okay, if Jake Fromm goes down, you're looking at 1 of 2 choices, in my opinion. You got Dwan Mathis, true freshman that we basically traded Justin Fields to Ohio State for this guy. He's 6'6", big, tall, huge guy, rocket arm. And then you got Stetson Bennett, a known quitter. He was at UGA as a freshman, quit, went to a different school because he wasn't playing. Bottom line, that's not my opinion. That's what he said. He came out and said it. You can find it and Google it if you don't believe me. But he said, I love Georgia, but I don't love Georgia enough to just be here. If I'm not playing, I don't want to be here. So he quit and left, went to a JUCO school where he led America in interceptions last year. Now he's back at UGA. So that just is what it is. My honest opinion on Stetson Bennett, I don't think he's a college level quarterback, not an SEC college level quarterback. If something happens in 2019 and I'm watching a Georgia football game during meaningful minutes and I see Stetson Bennett out there, things have gone drastically wrong in my mind. But anyway, I hope he improves. I hope he gets better. I hope Fromm stays healthy more than anything else. I've been hard on Fromm. I've been critical on Fromm. But listen, you're the quarterback in an SEC school at one of the top 5 programs in America since you've been there, sir. So, you're going to get some criticism. People want to praise Fromm for leading us to the national title game in 2017, but then when we lose to LSU or Texas or Auburn or Alabama, they want to say, well, it's a team game, it's not just Fromm's fault. Well, you can't have it both ways. The reality of the situation is that the quarterback position is the most scrutinized position in all of sports. You get way more glory than you deserve as a quarterback when your team wins, and you get way more blame as a quarterback when your team loses. This isn't anything new. This isn't anything I invented. This has been going on as long as football's been around. I don't know why people think it should somehow be different now because Jake Fromm is the quarterback at UGA. He has to get better. I mean, listen, and you could say that about every player on the team. I mean, don't you want every player on the team to improve and get better? Of course you do. So I don't understand why it pisses so many of you off when I say that about Jake Fromm. But listen, he's a game manager. I mean, we just have to accept that as Georgia fans. To this point, Jake Fromm has been a game manager. Now, he's the best game manager in all of college football, and that can't be argued or debated. Are there better quarterbacks? Yes, but they're not game. Trevor Lawrence is not a game manager. Tua Tagovailoa to Pineapple, not a game manager. I mean, I could go through a list here. Dwayne Haskins, from whatever the top quarterbacks were from last year, none of them were game managers. Fromm is a game manager, but he's the best game manager in all of college football. Yes, Alabama won a couple of natties with game manager quarterbacks. 8 years ago with Greg McElroy and 10 years ago with A.J. McCarron, okay? A game manager has not won a national title since, 2012? So what is it, 6, 7, 8 years ago? However long it's been. Fromm has got to play better against good teams, period. Now, I mentioned it in the video yesterday. He played great in the Alabama game this last year for 3 quarters or so, okay? But you're not going to win very many games against really good teams when you only average 5 points a game in the second half. And if you look at Georgia's last 2 games against Alabama, we scored a total of 10 points in the second halves of those 2 games. That's an average of 5 points per game in the second half against Alabama. You're not going to beat very many good teams doing that. Is it all Fromm's fault? No, obviously not. The defense gave up more points than they should. The play calling got a little bit too conservative. There was some stupid play callings, particularly in this year's SEC title game. So no, it's not all Fromm's fault. But like I said a few minutes ago, if you're going to prop this guy up because Nick Chubb and Sony Michel took us to a national title game and give Fromm credit for that, then you got to give him some blame for crapping the bed against Alabama 2 years in a row and never showing up in Baton Rouge just like this past year or at Sugar Bowl. That's it. I mean, you just have to be fair about it. He's got to play better. He's very efficient. He throws great short passes. He throws to the outside extremely well. These 8, 10, 12-yard out routes, he throws those balls great. Those are balls that have about a 0% chance of getting intercepted. He needs to improve with his passes over the middle, period. Our tight ends have been non-existent in the receiving game over the last couple of years. We treated Isaac Nauta like an extra offensive tackle. Just ridiculous. He's got to get better. He's got to get rid of the ball instead of taking sacks. I've given up on this guy running around. Now, is he a dual threat quarterback? No, but I can list 1,000 quarterbacks who aren't dual threat that can still scramble and move around in the pocket when they need to. Jake Fromm is not one of them. He regressed from 17 to 18 in terms of moving around in the pocket. The LSU game, we're down 9, about halfway through was it fourth quarter, I think? Maybe 9, 10 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. We're down by 9. We're in field goal range, 3rd and long. He takes a pointless sack where he runs backwards for 6 or 7 yards instead of throwing a ball out of bounds. Knocked us out of field goal range. The game was over at that point. He takes way too many sacks. He's got to learn to either get rid of the ball or move around in the pocket, but I question whether he's going to be able to do that. It might just be sort of an is what it is thing when it comes to Jake Fromm in terms of moving around in the pocket. He rushed for negative 27 yards last year. Oh, he's a quarterback, Lou, and he's not a dual threat. Of course he rushed for negative 27. Find me a team that's won a national title with negative 27 yards rushing from the quarterback, okay? Trevor Lawrence had, I think, 50 yards or 100 yards or something, but that's 100 yards more than Fromm had. He's not a dual threat either, but the guy can move around. Anyway, I'm not dogging Fromm here. Fromm is the starter. Fromm should be the starter. But there's no more excuses here. He's going into his 3rd year. He has to play better. He's got to pass for more than 2,700 yards, okay? He just has to. Now, we can blame a lot of that on the play calling from the last couple of years. We were run heavy. I get that. We should not waste time the first 4 or 5 weeks of this season running the ball 80% of the time just because we're playing crappy teams. We've got young receivers who need experience catching the ball, not blocking. This whole thing about let's sit this, Demetrius Robertson can't play because he doesn't know how to block. BS. The guy can catch. He's put him in the game. I mean, come on. Let's go. You got to develop your passing game early in the season against these toilet bowl teams so that when we get to the games that matter at the end of the season, we're not learning on the go. You got to do that this year. That's not on Fromm. That's on the coaching staff. This game plan of let's run it down their throat in the first half until we're up by 3 touchdowns and then put all the backups in the second quarter and make somebody hand off 45 times in a row. No. It's the other team's job to stop you. Quit feeling sorry for people and let's pass the ball and let's blow some of these cupcakes out like we're supposed to through the air. All right, defense. This video is going to be way too long now. It got me heated under the collar and everything else. But as soon as I mentioned the word Jake Fromm, half the Georgia fan base is already in the comment section with the drunk monkey routine, typing on the thing. You probably done broke your phone watching this video. But guess what? I honestly don't care. Defense. I think the defense is going to be better overall than it was last year. I just do. I took a step back in 2018 from where we were at defensively in 2017. I think we take another step forward, though, this year. Will it be quite the defense we had in 2017? I'm not sure. There's no Roquan Smith on this team, but I think we'll be really, really good on the outside, the edge rushers. I think that's where you'll see probably the biggest improvement you'll see on Georgia's team from last year to this year, I hope anyway, is going to be rushing the quarterback. Now, we've got some young guys that are extremely talented. I'm talking about NFL stars, Brenton Cox, Adam Anderson, Nolan Smith coming in as a true freshman. And we've got some returning pieces there too. The question mark, secondary, you got to replace DeAndre Baker. Tyson Campbell needs to play a lot better this year as a true sophomore than he did as a true freshman. A lot of people pointed out in yesterday's video that he looked a lot better in the Texas game, and I will agree with you. He did look a lot better in the Texas game. So maybe something has clicked with him, and he's gotten it together. But he needs to be the anchor of that defensive secondary for our defensive secondary to be as good as it needs to be. I like Eric Stokes on the other side. This guy plays out over his skis. He was nowhere near as highly recruited or talented or whatever out of high school, but honestly, he played better than Tyson Campbell last year. If he can improve just a little bit and we can get out of Tyson Campbell what we thought we were going to get out of Tyson Campbell, then we'll be okay at the corner position. And we've got some young guys that'll be chomping at the bit too. Tyreek Stevenson, DJ Daniel. You got J.R. Reed coming back to sort of anchor the safety position. So Richard LeCount, who needs to learn how to tackle this guy, the human pinball, Richard LeCount. This guy loves running into things. You know who Richard LeCount would be perfect to play for? Oklahoma. This guy loves running into things and bouncing off of them. And if you watch Oklahoma play a game, that's all their defense knows how to do. Richard LeCount, and I like Richard LeCount. You know what Richard LeCount's problem is? He's coming into football about 15 years too late. Right? Remember Thomas Davis, Greg Blue, if you're a Georgia fan, these safeties that Georgia had, 15, 16, 17, 18 years ago before they had all these rules about hitting the wide receivers. These were headhunters. These were people, you didn't want to go across the middle with Thomas Davis or Greg Blue sitting there. That's the type of player that Richard LeCount is. Unfortunately, you can't do that to people anymore. You have to actually hit them the right way, technique-wise, wrap them up, blah, all this kind of stuff. And LeCount has had a hard time doing that. Let's just be real. He's got to do a lot better there. We need way better play at the inside linebacker position this year than we got last year. Like I mentioned, we're not going to have a Roquan Smith, but we've got some serious talent at the inside linebacker position. But again, and this is a theme, a lot of it is young. So anyway, I'm repeating a lot of the stuff I said in yesterday's video. Let's put the schedule up on the screen. We'll go through it game by game and see what a best case, worst case might look like for Georgia. All right, here we go with the schedule. Now, of course, I've said this every time. I'll say it again. 2 bye weeks this year. That's not a change in the rules or anything like that. It's just the way the calendar falls this year. Every team is getting 2 bye weeks. Next year, we'll be back to the 1 bye week. I think it's 2027 or something before we have the 2 bye weeks again. It's just a quirk of the calendar. It has nothing to do with a change in football. So yes, there's 2 bye weeks. Georgia's are spread out pretty good. You play, 4 games, get you a bye week, play 3 games, get you another bye week. So they're spread out pretty good. If you have 2 bye weeks, I think what you don't want them bunched up together, right? You'd like to basically split your schedule into 3 parts. If ideal would be 4 bye week, 4 bye week. This is pretty close, playing 4 bye week, playing 3 bye week. Now, we start out a little unusual here with a conference game on the road at Vandy. Now, never good to start, in my mind, with a conference game, particularly on the road. Georgia gets lucky here, and that is at Vandy. I hate trashing Vandy. There's really no point or reason, but, I mean, the reality is right now, Vanderbilt is just nowhere near the talent level, the coaching level. Their program just isn't at a level to compete with a team like the University of Georgia. I think Georgia will probably go out and dominate that game, but the reality is when you're looking at Georgia's schedule right now, anyone with any sense is going to pencil that in as a W for Georgia, you would have to assume. Now, then we have a couple of nobodies at home in the non-con. Up first is Murray State, and then you have Arkansas State. Again, most likely wins in both those cases. Most likely 2 games where you'll see a bunch of players playing in the second half that you've never heard of. And then, of course, comes Georgia's first real test and what most Georgia fans will consider to be one of the biggest games on the schedule this year, Notre Dame in Athens. Of course, this is part 2 of a home-and-home series that Georgia and Notre Dame scheduled a long time ago. Part 1 of this game was played in South Bend in 2017. It was actually Jake Fromm's first start at the University of Georgia. Georgia fans will remember that game very well. We turned that stadium up there in the Notre Dame into Sanford Stadium North. They kept showing those overhead shots of the stadium, and there was more Georgia fans there than there was Notre Dame fans. And breaking news, it'll be even worse for Notre Dame when they come down to Athens. This is going to be a big game. It'll be one of these hyped up media games, right, that you're going to hear all the commentators on ESPN and sports radio and everywhere else talking about all off season long, because these are 2 really good programs right now that don't play very often, right? Georgia made the playoffs 2 seasons ago. Notre Dame made the playoffs last season. It'll be one of the biggest non-con games of the year. Georgia gets them at home. That's an obvious advantage for the University of Georgia in my mind. And Georgia has a bye week the week after that, so you don't have to worry about Georgia getting caught maybe looking ahead. Not that I would think that anyone really would get caught looking past Notre Dame, but again, nice to have a bye week there. Huge game, and we'll talk more about that one at the end. Then we get our bye week. All right, then we have a 3-game stretch of all SEC games, right? Starting off at Tennessee, and then at home against South Carolina and Kentucky. Playing 3 SEC games in a row, never easy, regardless of who the 3 teams are. Now, I happen to think that these are going to be 3 teams that are not going to be very good in 2019. I do expect Tennessee, and I'll probably do one of these videos on Tennessee. In fact, I think someone has already suggested it, so I'm definitely doing one. Not sure yet when. Or when yet, but I do think Tennessee will probably be better in 2019 than they were in 2018. But I do not think for one second that Tennessee is anywhere near the level of a Georgia right now. They're not there talent-wise. I don't believe they're there coaching-wise either. I do think Tennessee will be better, so this isn't a trash Tennessee thing. Tennessee missed a bowl game last year going 5-7. I don't think anybody would be surprised if Tennessee makes a bowl game in 2019. In fact, I think it's probably going to be expected. South Carolina and Kentucky. South Carolina took a step back last year, and it was unexpected, right? Most people had South Carolina pegged to finish second in the East last year, and some people had them as a dark horse to win the East. Of course, they ended up getting blown out by UGA, and what was it? Was it week 2 or 3? It was towards the beginning of the season. Georgia goes on the road to Columbia and just completely annihilated them, and their season just sort of tumbled downhill from there. And I don't expect things to get much better in Columbia this year. I think Will Muschamp may be hanging on for dear life by the time the end of the 2019 season comes around. Fans are going to run out of patience with him quick, I think, and you're going to start to see some of that this year. I think they take a step back. Same thing with Kentucky. They lose the two best players that they've had in my lifetime. Running back Benny Snell and edge rusher, I'm drawing a blank on his name now. Josh Allen. I can't completely slip my mind. I talked about Josh Allen all season long in 2018. He was one of my favorite players to watch last season. But anyway, the reality is Kentucky doesn't, I don't think there's anybody that could replace a Josh Allen. That's how good he was. And Kentucky just doesn't recruit at a level where they can even come close, I don't think, to replacing what they got out of Benny Snell or Josh Allen last year. Kentucky had a great year last year. I unfortunately, because again, no hate for Kentucky here, but unfortunately I think they're going to be taking a step back, which is a benefit for Georgia for this year. And plus we get them at home. So even though you got a 3-game stretch there, like I said, I think reasonable people would look at those 3 games right now and have Georgia as a pretty big favorite in all 3. All right, then Georgia has their second bye week, and this is the annual bye week. We have this bye comes at this point every single year right before the big showdown with Florida, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, the big Georgia-Florida game down in Jacksonville, played the end of every October, sometimes the very beginning of November, depending on how the calendar falls. But anyway, this will be Georgia's biggest game of the year, I think. Now, in terms of like fan excitement, the Notre Dame game is really high for obvious reasons. We have Texas A&M coming to Athens later in the year, which I think will be a big game just because it's the first time Georgia and Texas A&M have played. Of course, Texas A&M just joined in the SEC 7 or 8 years ago. But in my mind, this will be the game of the year in the SEC East. Last year, Georgia was undefeated entering this game. And no. Georgia had lost the week before this game. Well, 2 weeks because they had to bye. But anyway, each team was sitting on 1 loss entering this game, weren't they? Yeah, Georgia blew them out. Hard for me to predict a Georgia blowout anytime we play Florida. At least in the offseason, to predict a blowout against Florida in the offseason, I don't think I can do that. Now, sometimes the season unfolds and maybe Georgia or Florida just looks really, really bad, and it becomes easier to predict in September and October. But in terms of the offseason, you look at these 2 teams, Georgia and Florida, I don't think anybody right now would predict either one of these 2 teams to blow the other out. If you're talking about potential losses, which is sort of the point of this video, I think you have to at least put this, even if you're a Georgia fan, I think you have to at least put this in the category of a potential loss. Dan Mullen's second year at Florida, if the offense can get a little bit better than what it was last year and the defense can play at the level they need to, Florida's going to be a dangerous team again. Of course, they won 10 games last year, winning a New Year's Six Bowl over Michigan. They did finish 3rd in the East, though. Couldn't beat Kentucky at home, but I digress, though. Now you got to go play at Kentucky this year. Revenge game for Florida there. You got a lot of revenge games, don't you? Hadn't beat Mizzou since 2016. Anyway, let me stop. The point is, I do think Florida will be a good team. I do think this will be one of the biggest games of the year, not only in the SEC, but in the overall college football landscape. I don't think anybody would be surprised to see both these teams in the top 10 by the time this game comes around, just like we were last year. So, obviously a huge, huge game for both teams. All right, then Georgia comes back home to face Missouri. 2 things of interest, really, when you look at Missouri. Kelly Bryant, how's he going to do there? What type of offense are they going to run? How much different is it going to look than when they had Drew Lock? If you look at Drew Lock, this guy's a prototypical pocket passer. You look at Kelly Bryant, he has struggled passing the ball, in my opinion, and is but is pretty good at running around. So we'll see how how much, if at all, Mizzou tries to change their offense. Now, I think Kelly Bryant is going to want to throw the ball at Missouri, right? I mean, the whole reason you leave and go somewhere as a graduate transfer to play with one last year is to try to show people in the NFL that you can play at an NFL level. No one's mind is going to be changed about Kelly Bryant if he rushes for 800 yards but only throws for 2,500 or something, right? Kelly Bryant wants to sling the ball around and show people in the NFL that's what he can do. So we'll see if Missouri sort of sticks with their same offensive approach that they had under Drew Lock, or if they tweak it a little bit to let Kelly Bryant showcase what he can do with his legs. We'll see. And of course, the second thing of interest we talk about Missouri, probation, not eligible for postseason play, some academic stuff going on. I think they got hammered a little bit too hard, but it is what it is, nothing to do about it now, or appealing that. I don't know if the appeal's been heard yet or not, but they're not overturning that. You're just going to have to sit out the postseason. It is what it is. But again, this is one of those games, I think when you look at it right now, most rational people would say Georgia would be a pretty good favorite there. At Auburn, and I know this is going to be a game that's going to get talked about, especially on this channel, a whole lot over the course of the entire offseason for a couple of reasons. Number one, Kirby Smart's winless against the SEC West on the road. Will that continue? Blown out by Ole Miss in 2016, blown out by Auburn in 2017, beaten by LSU in 2018. 3 trips out west in road games for Kirby Smart against the SEC West, and he toted an L all 3 times. This is year 4. And you got to make the biannual trip or every other year trip out to the Plains. Is this the last year we play Auburn in November? Pretty sure it is. A bunch of crybabies cried to the SEC, got them to change the schedule. But our schedule is hard, woo. We have to play Georgia and Alabama in like a 3 or 4 week period, woo. That's great. Hey, Barner, guess what happens if you ever make the playoffs? Not that it matters. You're never sniffing the playoffs or coming anywhere close to it. But guess what happens if you make the playoffs? You have to play a top 4 team the first week of January. And then you have to play another top 4 team 7 days later. Yeah. But anyway, these nitwit Barners crying got the schedule changed. So this will be the last year this game is played at the end of the year here. But on the road at Auburn, listen, I think you've got to consider this a loss for Georgia. I mean, look at Kirby Smart's record against the West, right? You got to at least consider the possibility that this game could be a loss. Of course, I spent all last offseason talking about the game at LSU, and when I did my summertime game-by-game previews, I went ahead and predicted Georgia to lose to LSU and go 11-1, and Georgia went 11-1 with a loss to LSU. Could this be the 3rd year in a row that Georgia goes 11-1 with a loss on the road to the SEC West? I don't know. I certainly hope not. But I can tell you right now, if I wake up the first Saturday in December and Georgia is sitting at 11-1 with a loss on the road at Auburn and getting ready to play in the SEC title game, I won't care at all that we lost to Auburn. I hope we beat them. But the point is, the goal is not to beat Auburn. The goal is not to win a game on the road in the SEC West, to me. The goal is to win the East and make the SEC championship game in a position to where if you win that game, you would be in the playoffs. So you got to be 11-1, 10-2 at the worst. But anyway, so on the road at the barn. All right, in the last 2 games of the season, 1 at home, 1 on the road, we get Texas A&M in Athens. I think that's probably our 2nd toughest game on the schedule. I'm very high on Texas A&M this offseason. It seems like every single offseason there's 2, maybe 3 teams that I'm way higher on than most other people are, and this year Texas A&M falls into that category. I think Texas A&M is going to be a dangerous team. It's not going to surprise me at all to see Texas A&M competing for the SEC West. Obviously, Alabama will be a huge favorite in that division again, but I'm a believer in Texas A&M. I think they're going to be really, really good. This could potentially be a matchup of 2 top 10 teams played very late in the season that could make or break someone's entire season. This is going to be a huge game. And one that I'm looking forward to for sure. But for the purposes of this video, in considering, now I know a lot of people are going to look at Texas A&M and say Georgia's win that game, no problem, it's at home. And I understand that mindset, but for my purposes, I can't be as high as I am on Texas A&M and then not even consider the possibility that this game could be a loss for Georgia. And again, that's the point of this video, is to try to come up with a best case, worst case. So we got to consider all these games that might possibly end up being losses. So yeah, Texas A&M at home, and then the final game of the year on the road at the Little Sisters of the Poor up the road, Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's going to be a terrible team this year. They brought in a new coaching staff. Rest in peace, Paul Johnson. Man, I miss this guy already, Paul Johnson. He's one of my favorite coaches in all of college football. I wish Georgia Tech would have kept him forever, but they didn't. They brought in a real coach who's going to try to run a real offense up there in Atlanta. But the reality is Georgia Tech's roster on offense is loaded with players who have done nothing but played a triple option since they were in 5th grade. You can't flip a switch and turn those players into pro-style players. It's just not going to happen. Their quarterback is 5'5", and can't complete a pass, from his front door to his mailbox. He just can't. So it's going to be a rough transition for Georgia Tech. It'll probably benefit them in the long run to go ahead and make this change and get rid of that triple option circus offense that Paul Johnson was running. But it's going to be a rough year or 2, in my opinion, for Georgia Tech. All right, so there it is. That's all 12 games. Now, what do I think is the worst-case scenario for Georgia this year? I think you have to consider the possibility that they lose to Notre Dame. I think you have to consider the possibility that they lose to Florida. I think you have to consider the possibility that they lose to Auburn. and I think you have to consider the possibility that they lose to Texas A&M. I obviously don't think they're going to lose all 4 of those games, but this is a best case, worst case. I'm going to put my worst case scenario for the University of Georgia at 8-4. A lot of teams in America who that's their best case scenario. So 8-4, not the end of the world. Obviously not what Georgia fans are wanting or expecting, but I do think that's the, if everything goes wrong, I could see Georgia going 8-4. Now, best case scenario. Listen, Georgia has gone 11-1 in the regular season the last 2 years. Georgia could go 12-0. That is a possibility. Now, this is a hard schedule in my mind. I think this schedule is much harder than last year's. Now, we did have to play on the road at LSU last year, whereas this year our cross-divisional game is at home against Texas A&M. However, I think Texas A&M will be at least as good this year as Texas A&M was last year. So I think that's still a tough game. We get Notre Dame as a non-con game, whereas last year our biggest non-con game was Georgia Tech. So the non-con conference schedule is a little harder. We have to play at Tennessee. So anyway, the schedule is hard, but I don't think it's unrealistic to put Georgia's best case scenario at 12-0. I'm trying not to be a homer here, but you're talking about a team that outside of wide receiver basically returns everybody on the team. 4 out of the 5 starting offensive linemen. Quarterback will be the most experienced in the SEC going into his 3rd year as a starter. DeAndre Swift is in everyone's... I don't think DeAndre Swift will win the Heisman, so don't take this the wrong way. But if you look at a top 15 list of Heisman candidates, you'll see DeAndre Swift on there. He's a hell of a player. Our defense returns a ton of talent, and the last 3 years recruiting have all been top 3 classes. There's a lot of reasons to be excited if you're a Georgia fan. I think the best case scenario is 12-0. Again, I'm not saying Georgia will go 12-0. I'm not saying they'll go 8-4, but I think it'll be somewhere in there. When I do this series of videos over the summer, I will give you a definite record, not just for Georgia, but for, like I said in the beginning, 40, 50 teams. Anyway, if you made it this far in a video, you're a trooper. When I do these Georgia videos, they're always really long-winded. I can't help it. Honestly, I could sit here and talk for another hour and a half about Georgia, but no one would be watching. Well, let's find out. All right, no, I'm just kidding. Have a great day.
I'm about to drop you like